introduce you first.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to the fifth meet of Vata Talk with Professor M.B. Rani sir. Professor M.B. Rani sir is Institute Chair Professor of IIT Bombay, and he have many publications in heat pumps and HVDC.
HVAC.
Sorry, HVAC theories. So, without any further ado, let's start the session.
Hello, good evening to all of you. I hope my voice is clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So this presentation will be about technologies for energy conservation and sustainable development. And these are some of the technologies that have been developed at Heat Pump Laboratory at IIT Bombay. We have filed so far around 33 patents. Just one patent got filed just last week. And out of the 33, the first 18 have been granted. We have had a 100% strike rate so far. And we have defended the other 12 also, and we are hoping that that will also get this. We have licensed several technologies, around 27 technologies have been licensed so far. Many different technologies have been demonstrated and could be licensed in future. Now, to take you through the presentation, briefly we will see what are the various technologies. We are talking about electric heat-driven multi-utility heat pumps, then exhaust heat recovery systems and renewables. We'll also see in brief the need and scope for heat recovery and what are the options. We'll briefly also see the waste heat recovery options, because we can use the waste heat for operating many air conditioning refrigeration systems, and also I think people are interested in the dedicated outdoor air system. So in a humid place like Bombay or coastal regions, we will see that latent heat removal can be enabled using waste heat, using absorption or liquid desiccant systems. Liquid desiccant being a simpler system. So we'll see some of that also in this. And of course, liquid desiccant systems can also be used powered with solar as and when it is available. So we'll look at air-to-air heat recovery systems also, which can go in the dedicated outdoor air system, and we'll see how they can help us reduce the load. We will also see various types of heat recovery heat exchangers possible. And one of the technologies which has been very successful is the tube heat exchanger, which is vented double wall heat exchanger, which is very reliable compared to most of others. And it opens up many possibilities. Even after 18 years of filing the patent, we're still coming up with newer applications, and we are licensing technology for various applications even today based on this. And now we are ready to file some new applications, new patents with some additional features. We'll be looking at some of the technologies which have been deployed in brief, some case studies for superheat recovery, water heaters and heat pumps. The superheat recovery essentially gives us free hot water from existing air conditioning refrigeration systems. And heat pumps can give us either single or multiple utilities from a single equipped piece of equipment. So we'll look at some of the case studies like superheat recovery water heater from hotels, some dairy application, various food outlets, and so on and so forth. Okay. And then we'll also look at heat pump applications for automotive factories, for canteens, and so on and so forth. Also, we'll look at some heat pump applications for cold stores and this. And then we have developed some solar collectors. We can briefly cover some of the features of that. We have plastic air heaters which can take you up to 80, 90 degrees centigrade in a single pass. We have evacuated glass tubes which can take you up to 150 to 300 degrees centigrade in a single pass. Then we have steam generators, which are one-screw steam generators without continuous tracking needed for these. We have steam generators with built-in heat storage also. And then we have some liquid desiccant-based multi-utility heat pumps, which can generate dehumidified fresh air for you in a place like Mumbai using solar energy. It can also generate fresh water, potable water, and it can give you hot water for bathing, dishwashing, and other utilities. We will also look at refrigeration cum water heating applications for various situations. So just to take you through some of the technologies and some photographic representation of them, you can see that we have multi-utility heat pumps and superheat recovery water heaters. Water heaters. We have developed technologies right from residential applications of 1 ton or even lower than 1 ton, all the way up to 12 tons capacity in a single module and up to 24 tons for larger multiple compressor based systems. We have superheat recovery systems deployed from 1 ton application to 270 ton in a dairy. And even if 3,000 ton application comes up, we won't have a hesitation in taking up the project based on this. So what are the applications? What do they cater to? They can cater to heating, that is air heating, water heating, process fluid heating directly. Normally, conventional heat pumps heat up clean fluid, and then the clean fluid is used to heat up the process fluid because of the worry about contamination or accidental mixing of the two fluids. In this case, because of the reliable tube-tube heat exchanger, which in its simplest form could be something like 2 tubes put side by side and thermally bonded with a thermal bonding material. And in this case, one fluid passes in one of the tubes and the other fluid passes through the second tube. The advantage of this heat exchanger is that you can select the material of construction of the 2 tubes independent of each other. If I were to give you an example of seawater being cooled using ammonia, the only common material that is available is titanium, which becomes very costly, which is compatible both with seawater and ammonia. But in the tube-tube configuration, we can use cupronickel for seawater, and the ammonia tube can be carbon steel, stainless steel, any of these metallurgies, which is much cheaper than your titanium tube. Titanium, of course, is also difficult to work with, and these common material of construction will be much cheaper in this. So this was our first McDonald superheat recovery, and then later we deployed around 340 installations in McDonald alone to generate free hot water from existing air conditioning systems. Now, we have also deployed the tube-tube heat exchangers in multi-utility heat pumps. Now, this is a heat pump which can be used in, which has been deployed in automotive industry, some hotels, and so on and so forth also. Some Club Mahindra Goa has it deployed in a water-to-water format. So this generates, in this particular form, which you see here, this is a compact unit with just a 1 meter by 1 meter footprint, and it can give you cooling as much as 12 tons. This particular unit is a 8.3 ton capacity unit, but a 12 ton compressor would can be incorporated in the same size, or we have given 12 ton compressors also in the same footprint with the evaporator extending all the way to the top on either side of the heat exchanger. Right now it's extending only up to this. So ambient air gets, or the surrounding air gets filtered, cooled, dehumidified, heat is extracted by the evaporator from this, and then the heat plus the compressor power required to compress the refrigerant from the low vapor pressure from the evaporator to the condenser pressure is then delivered out in the condenser. Now, the condenser heat in this case is used up for heating cleaning solution in an automotive factory. The cleaning solution could be replaced with water for your hostel application. So on one side, if you imagine keeping this inside your mess. So if you keep this in your mess, this will take the air from the mess, this indoor air from the mess. It will cool the air, dehumidify it, and release it back into the mess. And the heat taken from that, plus the power consumed by the compressor, will be delivered as hot water, which can supply hot water for your bathing, dishwashing, and various other applications for washing machine and other things. So this unit can do two things in this form. It also had a possibility of recovering potable chilled water for drinking in this particular unit, which is shown here. And that water would be supplied to the shop floor water coolers. So the shop floor water coolers won't have to operate because it would get pre-cooled water coming into the tap. So the sensor provided in the conventional water cooler will detect that the water is already cold, so the compressor for the water cooler would not have to operate. So in that way, this particular unit was capable of giving three utilities. First is the air conditioning, second is the hot water or solution heating in this particular application, and the third was your providing chilled water for drinking. So as you can see, there are applications in your hostels, in canteens, and various other things. Then we had also deployed 24-ton evaporatively condensed multi-utility heat pump in McDonald's. In this particular case, it was giving DX cooling, that is direct exchange cooling in the kitchen. So the liquid refrigerant supplied to the kitchen air handling unit would be coming from this unit. And the evaporated refrigerant vapor will then come back into this, and it will be compressed using the compressors present in this unit. We had two 12-ton compressors present in this, and these two 12-ton compressors would then compress the refrigerant to the condenser pressure. And because the pressure is higher, it can condense at a higher temperature. And because of the superheat, the superheat is much higher than the condensing temperature. Typically, the condensing temperature for an air-cooled chiller or air-cooled refrigeration system for this application would be operating at 54.4 degrees for a 35-degree ambient, typical ambient in, say, Mumbai. In this case, the evaporator temperature was same, 7.2 degrees this centigrade, but the condensing temperature would be lower because we are recovering heat in the form of hot water. So part of the superheat would be recovered as hot water for sanitation, and then the desuperheated refrigerant would then be evaporatively condensed in this particular unit. I will show you what are the patents we have deployed for evaporative condensation. Evaporative condensation reduces the requirement of air that needs to be passed through this, because the air is not sensibly heating, but it is evaporating water into it, and thus the quantity of air required is less. The reduced quantity of air in this particular case enabled us to reduce the airflow rate, and the pressure drop was much lower in this particular unit. So the total power consumed by the fans in this unit for a 24-ton system was around 9 times less than the power consumed by a conventional air-cooled condenser fan for a similar size unit. So, and in addition to that, because of the lower condensing temperature, the power consumption saving in this unit was around 25 to 36%. So this is one of the multi-utility heat pump applications that is. The tube heat exchangers also give us many advantages with respect to very low inventory of refrigerant in the system. Inventory of the refrigerant is important because some of the refrigerants are causing ozone depletion. Some might be hazardous or toxic, like ammonia is flammable and toxic also. So if we can reduce the charge of ammonia, then using ammonia in many applications like commercial heat pumps and things like that, or even for air conditioning applications, will be feasible. Now, in this particular case, the charge for the refrigerant could be reduced down to as low as 0.1 kg per ton. Now, just to put things in perspective, a conventional air conditioner would have somewhere around 0.6 to 1 kg of refrigerant per ton of air conditioning. And in this case, because of the tube configuration, because of low internal volumes of the heat exchanger on the refrigerant side and higher heat and mass heat transfer coefficient, we were able to reduce the mass refrigerant required to this. Now, some of the new refrigerants like flammable refrigerants like propane and so on and so forth are this technology will be very helpful for that also. And of course, the reliability of this heat exchanger is very good because of the double wall construction. Okay. Now, in this particular case, it was heating on one side as well as cooling on the other side. So it was concurrently heating water from 25 to 55 degrees centigrade here, and it was cooling water from 12 to 7 degrees, both happening concurrently. Now, in this case, we needed to store the hot water or the chilled water if we did not have concurrent utility. Now, to overcome this, we have come up with a new generation of heat exchangers, wherein this particular heat pump is one of our latest versions of this. This is 6-in-1 heat pump. So I described to you a 3-in-1 heat pump, which could do air conditioning, water heating or solution heating, and water cooling. This does 6 utilities concurrently. And the beauty of this is that the utilities need not be consumed at the same time. So if cooling is required now and heating is hot water is required at a later time, we don't have to have a separate storage space. The storage spaces were built within the heat pump itself. Now, this was a 12-ton compressor-based heat pump, which was deployed in NTPC, Netra, National Thermal Power Corporation, R&D headquarters at Greater Noida. This has been operating there since May 2017. And the utilities that this produces is the primary utility is air conditioning. So let me first start with that. It gives you dehumidified fresh air and maintains the indoor at 27 degrees and 60% RH in summer and monsoon. It also gives hot air at 41 degrees in winter in order to maintain the space temperature of 22 to 24 degrees centigrade in winter in the canteen. It concurrently generates 150 liters of potable water. Now, the potable water is stored within this tank, within the heat pump itself. So there are no pumps required to circulate the water. There is no separate heat exchanger required for that, and so on and so forth. And we can deliver potable drinking water at 15 to 18 degrees centigrade at the outlet of the tap without using any pumps in this particular situation. Okay, similarly, we can deliver 2000 liters of hot water using this heat pump at 60 degrees for cleaning, cleaning utensils, cleaning floor and other sanitary needs for the canteen. RO water is also heated in a once-through mode right up to 95 degrees centigrade also. So you take this 95-degree water, you put some rice in it or this, and it can cook itself without you having to heat it up again. You can use this for cooking various other vegetables and various other items. So hot water for cooking, 200 liters per day. Now the beauty is, although the heat pump operates for only 6 to 7 hours a day, that is a couple of hours in the morning during breakfast time, 3 hours during lunch time, and 1.5 hours in the evening. The hot water, chilled water, as well as the cooking water, RO water, is available 24/7. In fact, the chilled water from this unit is available for gardeners and watchmen even during the weekends when the facility is actually not operated during the day. So this has pretty good paybacks also, payback of less than 2 years, even if solar water heaters are already installed. And in situations where the solar water heater are not yet installed, we can offset the cost of the solar water heater through the cost of this unit, and then the payback becomes even less than that, even just 1 year payback is possible. Now, coming to the dedicated outdoor air systems, people were interested in dedicated outdoor air systems. Now, dedicated outdoor air systems are systems which bring in outdoor air, pre-condition it to temperature and humidity levels similar to the indoor air being recirculated in a conditioned space, and then let it in. This is done to improve the energy efficiency of the overall system, air conditioning refrigeration system. Okay. Now, this particular air-to-air heat recovery system, which is described here, is tested to cool air from 42.9 degrees centigrade to 25.8 degrees centigrade, okay, in a single pass in this case. The flow rate in this particular case was about 45 CFM. It is modular. So if you just double the size of the heat exchanger, put twice the number of core elements, you will have twice the flow rate. The effectiveness was quite high, 82.6%. The pressure drop was quite low, just 5.6 mm of water column or 56, 57 pascals. Conventional air conditioning units, the coils would have pressure drop of anywhere between 150 to 200, 250 mm of pressure drop in the conventional heat exchanger. Okay. In this case, ambient air from the room, which is stale air, which is being exhausted at 26.6 degrees centigrade, if it is exhausted, and if it is around 60% RH, that is first humidified in the rotating contacting device in this case. And when humidified, the RH increases to 90% and the temperature drops, drivable temperature drops to 22. So we have 22 degrees centigrade air available now to cool the 42.9 degrees centigrade air. This is the outdoor air. This is from a dry and hot and dry condition like Nagpur, Ahmedabad, Delhi, and so on and so forth in summer, Jalgaon. Okay, and that air is cooled down to about 25.8 degrees centigrade. When the temperature drops, the RH is not increasing, but the relative humidity increases because the RH is same. Okay, where the humidity ratio is same, but the relative humidity increases because the temperature has been dropped. Okay, so in this case, you're able to cool the air from 42.9 degrees to 25.8 degrees using the 26.6 degrees. So if you see it, it appears to be contradicting the first law. Okay, how can you, or the second law rather, how can you cool the air to a temperature lower than this? But there is no fallacy here. You're utilizing the evaporatively cooled, pre-cooled air. And this is a similar type of system, not of this construction, but similar type of system is operated in DAC CAC building. And there the CFM is 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh 59,000 CFM. So these are modular systems which can be deployed for various applications. Coming to the exhaust heat recovery system. Now, if we are talking about a place like Mumbai, where your relative humidity is very high, what do you do there? In that case, we may not be in a position to reduce the temperature to such a low value unless the moisture is removed. So removing the moisture can be done using liquid desiccants. Now, liquid desiccants are salt solutions which have high affinity for water vapor. It's just like jaggery. You keep jaggery outside in the rainy season in Mumbai, and you'll see that it becomes soggy because it is hygroscopic. So similarly, we have salts which are very highly hygroscopic, and they can absorb moisture from ambient air even at ambient temperature. So if that is used to to remove the moisture from this air, okay, then the temperature of the ambient air, let's say in Mumbai today, the temperature outside might be say 30 degrees centigrade, and the RH might be close to 80% or even higher. If it's raining, the temperature might be 27, 28 degrees, and the RH might be more than 90, 95%. So if we can use this, pass this air through liquid desiccant solution, now is a similar system put up on this side where you replace the water with liquid desiccant. When the air passes over the liquid desiccant contacting media, the temperature, like here, the water evaporated in the with the liquid desiccant put in here, the water will condense into it. The water vapor will condense into it, and instead of the temperature dropping, the temperature will increase. The RH instead of rising here with liquid desiccant present, which is hygroscopic, the RH will reduce, and then that hot dry air can then be put in from this side. And then even in Mumbai, we can operate a system like this to take care of this, provided we dehumidify the air first. And the dehumidification can be enabled using liquid desiccant. Now, what do we do with the dilute liquid desiccant? To regenerate the dilute liquid desiccant, we can put up another system like this, where you put hot water or hot air or hot exhaust can be brought in contact with this. So where the solution gets heated, the partial pressure, the solution vapor pressure increases. If the solution vapor pressure increases to a value higher than the partial pressure of water vapor in the air, the water vapor will vaporize from the solution and get out into the outdoor ambient air. Now, when that happens, you have a concentrated liquid desiccant again. You cool it down using the liquid desiccant which was going out, which was cool, and then you can reuse it in the system. So we'll see some of those systems later. Now, where do you get the heat to regenerate that liquid desiccant? The heat to regenerate the liquid desiccant can come from various sources. It can come from, if you have gensets, if you have gas turbine power plants, if you have process waste heat and so on and so forth, we can pick it up from there, and that can be used for regenerating the liquid desiccant. Now, this slide summarizes some of our technologies which we are deployed for exhaust heat recovery. Now, this one particular one, the actual heat exchanger is only between this and this, the silver color one, and that is for a 7.5 megawatt gas turbine exhaust heat recovery. We'll see some individual slides later if we have time. But this is for gas turbine exhaust heat recovery to heat up thermic fluid from 230 degrees to 250 degrees centigrade. Now, the conventional units were almost 3 times the size of our unit, which is 1/3 the capacity, 1/3 the size of a conventional gas turbine exhaust heat recovery. Now, gas turbine exhaust heat recovery is a simpler application if you see that way, because the gas turbine exhaust has no contaminants in it. It's a clean gas. Although it's very hot, it is a clean gas. The temperature of the exhaust could be anywhere between 450 degrees to even higher, depending upon the type of gas turbine you're using. Now, as against that, the general conventional engines have exhausts which are very dirty in nature. They are very fouling in nature. They have exhausts which have sticky soot in it. It has unburnt lubricating oil and unburnt fuel at times if the engine is not operated in a properly tuned manner. And in such situations, the exhaust gases will be very fouling in nature. And in that case, the heat exchangers foul up. If the heat exchangers foul up, the overall heat transfer coefficient goes down. If the overall heat transfer coefficient goes down, the heat transfer surface area required is very large. And in conventional steam generators for gas turbine, for engine exhaust heat, the exhaust heat recovery units are larger than the engines themselves. While in our case, you can see that the exhaust heat recovery steam generator is placed right next to the muffler of that engine. So it's not larger than the engine, but it's similar to the size of the muffler of that engine. This particular installation was 1000 kVA genset, 2 numbers in a 5-star Chennai hotel. Okay. This where we are generating steam at around 10.5 bars, that is 11.5 kg absolute, around 186 degrees centigrade. The saturated steam was being generated in this particular case. And then the steam was used for operating absorption refrigeration systems, lithium bromide 2-stage double effect lithium bromide water system to produce chilled water for the hotel. So this is an example where you can recover heat from gensets and use it for producing additional cooling using the exhaust. So you're talking about cogeneration. So similarly, we have systems, you'll see later, that we are using the radiator hot water to produce additional cooling using ammonia absorption refrigeration system. So in this case, we are talking about exhaust heat recovery. Now, this is dirty and sooting nature. Now we have multi-modular heat recovery with sonic soot blowers and online soot cleaning mechanisms like compressed air or steam-based soot blowing soot cleaning mechanisms provided, so that the heat exchangers can continue to operate while the cleaning of the heat exchanger is happening. We don't have to take a shutdown. Then we have another class of heat exchangers where we have designed heat exchangers which can be shaken in place while they are recovering heat. This was deployed in Hindustan Unilever, where the coal-fired furnace exhaust heat was recovered to generate steam, and then the steam was used to humidify the baking tunnel to make your bread soft. So next time you eat your modern bread, when you are on campus, you can think about the softness of that bread might partly be contributed because of the humidification that is going on with our unit. Later on, we licensed the technology and they were to replicate it in 16 different locations. By the way, we have deployed my client had deployed around 60 installations of genset exhaust heat recovery, right from 135 kilowatt to 6 megawatt single engine. And in fact, in some of the locations, there were 3 6 megawatt engines fitted with our exhaust heat recovery units for generating steam. We have also developed recuperators for gas turbine, for micro gas turbine. This is a 50 kilowatt micro gas turbine recuperator to enhance the efficiency of the gas turbine power plant for a mobile missile launcher for our armed forces. Then we have Stentor exhaust heat recovery, where Stentors are processing cloth processing equipment, where before the cloth is rolled out of the mills for sale, it goes through a process called for heat treatment and humidity treatment, so that they don't shrink later on when we make our clothes and stitch our clothes and others. So they're pre-washed with this. And the Stentor exhaust might have water vapor, and also depending upon the cloth that is used. If it is this, it could be using chemical vapors will be coming out with that, which could be sticky and which could deposit and condense when we try to recover heat. So these are washable heat exchangers in that case. Okay. So these are the heat recovery types. Then we have done sorption refrigeration systems where we have recovered heat from the engine exhaust, or solar energy is recovered, or hybrid air conditioning systems using liquid desiccant and vapor compression system, or adsorption refrigeration system for cooling using the heat as the input power. Then recently we have, a couple of years ago, we have licensed technology for rotating contacting device based wastewater vaporizers. Now, typically in an industry, wastewater is vaporized by multi-effect vaporizers, which have thermal COP of around 3 to 4 in a 3 or 4 stage wastewater vaporizer, but they have a lot of problems with respect to corrosion, fouling, and so on and so forth. While in our case, this is operated without any heating in this case, using ambient air itself if it is not very humid. Okay, it is not, yeah. So in this case, we have obtained COPs as high as 36 to 55. In fact, we have reached even 64 COP now. And although this is electrical COP, even if you convert it to thermal COP, this is still going to be almost 10 times the COP of more than 10 to 20 compared to 3 to 4 for a thermal unit. So we are now deployed a 200-ton cooling tower also, and these units can also be used as air washers for cleaning up of the air, for humidifying the air, for dehumidifying the air. If we put up liquid desiccant instead of water, it can dehumidify the air. So it has many applications. We'll see some of those later. Now, renewable energy-based systems, we have technologies for plastic windmills. We have technology for plastic air heaters going up to 60 to 90 degrees centigrade in a single pass. We have steam generators here where we can generate, steam generators here with heat pipes. We have up to is a patented heat pipe technology where we have up to 60 to 66 heat pipe evaporators operating with a common condenser. So these are serviceable heat pipes, as again conventional heat pipes in solar water heaters with heat pipes, which are non-serviceable in the field. And then we have solar air heaters here, which are non-tracking collectors essentially, with very low concentration ratio, anywhere between 2 to 3. And the temperatures that we have delivered are 150 to 300 degrees centigrade with this, without tracking. Then we have solar refrigerator cum water heater here with built-in ice bank tank to preserve the cooling effect for 24 hours in a refrigerated. This is licensed to Godrej. This was developed for Godrej. Then we have the plastic air heaters, which we have deployed in Leh. Now, this is the recent development of solar air heaters and steam generators. These are flat plate steam generators without any tracking, okay, which are very durable, light in weight. Air heaters are as light as 7.5 kg per meter square. The steam generators are as low as 12 kg per meter square, as compared to conventional flat plate water heaters weighing somewhere between 20 to 30 kg per meter square, typically 25 to 30 kg per meter square. And the efficiencies that we offer are also higher. We offer 50 to 80% efficiency based on global radiation. If you have 1000 watt incident, we can easily go above 80% at 75 degree supply air temperatures. Then we have steam generators, which typically at 1000 watt would give you around 60% efficiency based on global radiation. And you can have tap water coming in and steam going out from the other side without any sophisticated controls. Some of the applications can be cooking, process heating, residential, commercial, industrial heating, and so on and so forth. Then we have solar steam generators with built-in heat storage, and the storage temperatures we have achieved is up to 245 degrees centigrade in this case. And again, the efficiencies are similar. The costs are also much lower than any of the conventional solar technologies that we are aware of. And these type of this we have can use for solar cooking very effectively. These are solar air heaters for even for low ambient temperatures down to -20 or even -30 degrees centigrade. We can give hot air at 40 degrees centigrade with this. We have deployed these in Leh, Ladakh area. We have deployed this in Nagaland for food drying application and so on and so forth. Now, this is an application where we have a cold store cum dryer. So on one side, the multi-utility heat pump is maintaining a cold store at about 6 degrees centigrade, as you can see here. And this is in Kohima. And the condenser heat is then used for drying application, for drying of agro produce and so on and so forth. And this has built-in thermal storage also, which enables the elimination of need for backup gensets in this case. And in this case, as you can see here, the solar air heaters that we're talking about are deployed here. 27 collectors were deployed in 27 collectors of 2.1 meters square each were deployed here as a roof of the unit. Note that there's no conventional roof below this. Okay, on the structure, the panels are directly mounted as a roof of this, and then the hot air is brought in and then circulated through a biomass-based, biomass-backed up dryer. So when the solar is not available, the biomass can be fired, and the same unit can continue to dry. Or during the night time, if you want, we can continue the operation with biomass firing. Now, the advantage of this type of collector is that the pressure drop is extremely low through these collectors. The pressure drop is as low as 1.6 to 5 mm of water column only. And because of this low pressure drop, the fan power is very low, and 1 meter square of PV panel could recover heat, draw heat by drawing air, ambient air through the collectors and heating up to 70-75 degrees centigrade from 9 collectors of 2.1 meters square each. So around 20 meters square of collector area could be catered to with simply 1 meter square of PV panel. So grid independent systems can also be deployed. These are some of the dried products. You can see the texture and the color in this, and they were well received by this. These are some other products also dried using this. Some economics, you can see that the heat pump based cold store cum dryer, this had payback period of as low as just 6 months. Okay, for drying of in this case. Yeah, this is for ginger drying. Okay, and Naga chilies are dried. Naga chili is a very high value product. It's a very, very hot chili, and it has extremely high value. In fact, I believe it is even exported to US for some military application. The cost is recovered within just 65 days because of the high this. Now, the solar dryers which we deployed at the roof for Naga chili, for ginger gave a payback of 225 days, solar days, and for Naga chili it was just 77 days for solar. I don't think any of the conventional solar drying applications can give you this kind of thing. So this gives you an overview of some of our technologies. Now coming to the specific benefits of energy conservation. In my opinion, before deploying energy conservation measures, we should first try to, while deploying energy conservation initiatives, we should first try to reduce the demand of the utilities, then try to reduce the life cycle cost by judiciously using multi-utility heat pumps or waste heat recovery and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you need to be environment friendly also. So the main drivers for energy conservation can be reduced demand for utilities, low life cycle cost can be one of the this, and environmental friendly possibilities are the added benefits of these things. So multi-utility heat pumps can reduce the initial cost as well as the energy consumption, operating cost, and it can reduce the space requirement. It can also reduce the maintenance requirements for this particular system. Proper application engineering, however, has to be done so that you select a suitable size and don't oversize it and things like that, so that the paybacks are good. As I said, for water heating, now solar water heaters can give you hot water only during the when sun is available, but waste heat recovery from refrigeration air conditioning systems can give you hot water anytime the refrigeration unit is on. Now, just imagine your cold stores in your kitchen in the hostels are also on all the time. Okay, throughout 24 months, 12 months. So you can recover the heat from that for heating water, and that will be free. Okay, and in fact, that will also improve the performance of the cold stores in this case. Okay. Then of course there are many other applications of drying, dehumidifying clothes, and various other things. Generating potable water is also another application for this thing. The tube-tube heat exchanger, as I said, you can have multiple tubes put together. So you can have 2 fluids exchanging heat, you can have 3 fluids exchanging heat. We have done up to 5 fluids exchanging heat in a single heat exchanger using this. So they are modular in nature, they are vented double walls, so they are very reliable. They don't allow mixing to happen. So they can offer high heat transfer coefficient because of the bends and mixing that happens within the boundary layer because of the structure of the heat exchanger. Material of construction, you have wide choice of material of construction. You can select the tube material based on the fluid that is passing through it and need not be compatible with both the fluids. And cleaning can be cleaning in place without having to open it, unlike plate heat exchangers, it can get fouled and then you have to open it up. So it's some of the applications that we have deployed it for radiator hot water heat recovery, superheat condenser heat recovery, liquid desiccant based multi-utility heat pumps, fuel oil heating, thermic fluid heating, water heating, transfer oil cooling, heating and cooling of potable water, this, and also shear sensitive and temperature sensitive fluids can also be heated. Temperature sensitive fluids like honey, and fruit juices with fibrous material can be heated or cooled in this unit. And tubular heat exchangers can also be used as reactors for various chemical engineering processes and while recovering the heat. Okay. I think there was a group of people who said that they would be interested in the jaggery making process. So I have included some slides here for jaggery making. Now this is a Tata Center funded project. And the aim was to develop a modular energy efficient jaggery maker, and the objective is to demonstrate a jaggery maker with very low labor. It is to be less labor intensive and operator friendly. So no heat stress of operating in front of the furnaces and so on and so forth, as well as fumes and things like that will not be encountered by the operators here. And also the quality of jaggery would improve because it will be in a closed this instead of the open system. Caramelization will be less because of lower temperature of operation. And the bagasse, 100% bagasse will be saved, which can be fed back to the farms for organic farming. And that can also improve the yield of this. So we looked at laboratory prototype and field prototype for this, that is 10 kg per hour cane crushing and 1 kg jaggery approximately, and 1 ton per day crushing and 5 kg per hour jaggery processing if it is 20 hours. So this is currently I have a Tata fellow who will be joining me on this hardware to take this further. So these are some slides. At 10,000 kg of cane when crushed, it gives you around 6,500 liters of juice, and then it gives you around 1,200 to 1,440 kg of jaggery. Okay. So how to the conventional process is vaporizing it. So in our case, what we are doing is instead of vaporizing and letting the vapor go into atmosphere and vaporizing it using fuel fired, typically bagasse is fired, and many a times most of the bagasse gets consumed in the firing process. So here what we are doing is we are just simply taking the vapor and compressing it to a higher pressure so that it can condense at slightly higher temperature than the temperature at which the juice is boiling. And by doing so, we are able to supply all the heat that is required in this. If you look at it from the first law principle, okay, whatever heat is required to boil, okay, that gets added with the compressor power input, okay, and then the total heat is supplied. So we always have extra heat available to boil than what is actually required. So even after accounting for heat losses and things like that, we still have sufficient heat to continue the process once it is initiated. Okay, so in this case, initially when the juice is raw, the concentration of sugar is low, maybe about 16 to 18 or 20 Brix. The concentration of juice being low, your boiling point elevation is low. And because the boiling point elevation is low, the juice boils at almost 99.4 degrees centigrade saturation temperature at 1 atmospheric pressure. Okay. And when the juice gets concentrated finally, okay, the boiling point goes down, boiling point elevation goes up as high as 18 degrees centigrade. And in that case, although the juice temperature is around 100 degrees, 94.3 degrees in this case, because of higher delta T required for heat transfer, the vapor pressure is 0.4 bar. So now we have to compress from 0.4 bar to 1 atmosphere. In the initial case, we were compressing from 0.97 bar to 1 atmosphere. So you'll realize that the power required for compression is not very high. And because the power required is not very high, our COPs are very high. COP is defined as the ratio of the heat supplied for boiling divided by the power supplied to operate the compressor. Okay. Here you can see on a pH diagram, the steam chart is used, and water boils here from the juice, and it is available at a low pressure of around 0.4 bars towards the end of the jaggery making process, and then it is compressed to 1 bar, and it condenses at around 100 degrees centigrade, and that provides heat to heat up the solution. Okay. So in the initial phase, that boiling point elevation is very low, and so the juice can evaporate at 99.7, more than 9.9 bar pressure. So the pressure ratio is extremely less, and and so the power required is very less. And note that most of the water comes out at this phase. Now you can see that here. This was a compressor which we were developing. We have filed several patents on this. And this is a long stroke compressor. The 33rd patent is also filed on a similar related application for expanding steam using a similar long stroke application. So in this case, normally in thermodynamics, we would be told that you can't operate a compressor in two phase. You can't expand wet steam and so on and so forth. So this is an alternative to that. Long stroke mechanism allows us to do this. So these are some tests that we had conducted at bench scale for this, where our cylinder to bore ratio was as high as 9. Conventional reciprocating engines give you 0.8 to 1.2 is the typical ratio. Here we could go to 9. So this allows us to operate the thing in wet mode and so on and so forth. Now this is the heat exchanger developed for the simple case. Then after testing, we went to the larger this. Okay, 32 this with 160 bore with a stroke to bore ratio. So this was this entire jaggery making unit, a tabletop jaggery making unit. So you see the clarified juice in this, and you can get concentrated juice from one side. After it's a batch process in this case, and the steam will be compressed, will be drawn out from here, compressed, and then supplied on the shell side. Now, just to put some this, the motor was 3000 RPM. The actual power consumed was around 50 or 75 watts. I'll just come to that. So this was the other version that we built with water was getting carried along with the steam which was coming out. So we had to put some separators here. We had put some check valves here. We had modified the check valves to be very low pressure ratio. So this is some of the diagrams. You can see that initially the juice level in the heat exchanger is here, and towards the end the juice level drops to very low value. So the power consumed was only about 152 watts. Okay, sorry, yeah, power consumption was as low as this. Here. So this was the unit, complete unit, but this was all instrumentation for the PhD students' work. That is not required. Simulation was done, and as you can see here, initially the water concentration, the solution salt sugar concentration is low, so the boiling point elevation is also low. And as the sugar concentration and the LMTD is also low, because the heat transfer coefficients are much better at the low concentration because of low viscosity. And so as the solution concentration goes up, it becomes very viscous, and the heat transfer coefficient drops from something like more than 2000 watt per meter square Kelvin to around 50-60 watt per meter square Kelvin. So the delta T, LMTD required to transfer the heat increases significantly. So you can see that various parameters are plotted here, how the pressure starts dropping as the solution concentration keeps increasing. Okay, and so on and so forth. And the moisture removal also can be seen from here. Okay, amount of moisture removed is here. Okay, so this color, if you see, it says this. So initially, going from here to here, the high moisture content is a lot of moisture is removed. But as you go towards the final, the amount of moisture that is removed in the final stage is quite small. Okay, so most of the water gets removed in the early stages where the pressure ratio is low, where the concentration, solution concentration is low. So the heat transfer coefficients are also good. The LMTD required is less. So the vapor pressure is high, and the vapor pressure ratio across the evaporator, boiler to the condenser is low, and so your power consumption is low. So all these things, ultimately what it does is it gives you a high. Initially the pressure ratio is only 1.04. Towards the end, the pressure ratio goes to 2.47. Okay, and so the initial COP can be as high as 140. And this, to put things in perspective, or 5-star AC in conventional home air conditioning systems is around 3.5, 3.6. So that is for a 5-star. If it is 3-star, it will be less. So you can compare these, that this is much better than a 5-star AC also. So we tested the water also, and we found that the water is of potable quality. Okay. So the water, when we tested the water which condensed out from the other side, we saw that the acceptable limits for color, odor, pH, and so on and so forth are here. And they found, when tested, they did not detect any color. The odor was agreeable. The pH was well within the range specified for potable water, and the other contaminants were also not found in this. So the water also which is produced from this can be potable and can be bottled. So this was more about the jaggery making process. Now we also have a larger system being integrated, okay, where we will be processing 1 ton of cane per day. Okay. So overall, the jaggery making this, okay, I think this slide is not relevant. So this will say that they demonstrated the efficacy of long stroke reciprocating compressor. So compressor stroke to bore ratio as 9 was demonstrated. Achieved pressure ratio of 8:1, 8.1. Okay, while using this compressor. Linear and angular offset played an important role in the bending stress across the disc. So the shaft, we had some issues with the shaft breaking up periodically. So we are working on that. And then investigated performance of this from 20 bricks to 90 bricks in detail. And we see that only 6.7 kilowatt hours of electrical power to produce to remove 1 meter cube of water. Okay. And what this translates to is the latent heat exchangers were also fabricated. The design of juice preheater is also. And after all this, the conventional jaggery maker earns can earn about 1 point this. With this particular unit, we expect that the jaggery maker can earn about 8.7 rupees per kg of jaggery because of the saving in bagasse and this. Okay. So this is about the jaggery making unit. I think I'll stop here and maybe switch over to some other technologies related to air or dedicated. These are some heat exchangers that we have patents on radiant panel heat exchangers. We're using this for cooling high performance computing centers. This is deployed in my house on the 4-in-1 multi-utility heat pump. Now the multi-utility heat pump in my house is operating for more than 15 years, actually 17 years now. Okay, June. So now it's past June 2020. So it's more than 17 years old, and we still have our bath using the hot water from this. The hot water from the heat pump condenser side goes for a dishwasher, washing machine inlet, and so on and so forth. And I have two radiant panels, one in the dining area, as you can see here, and one in the bedroom for cooling the two rooms. This is in my office. We had built a radiant condenser for a water cooler, which was serving the department for more than 3 years before the current one. This slide we have already seen. Then rotating contacting device. Now the rotating contacting device are also devices which can be used for aeration, air conditioning applications like humidification, liquid desiccant dehumidification, air washers, air-to-air heat recovery, cooling towers, evaporative coolers, indirect evaporative this. Okay. I think this is the 200-ton cooling tower we have deployed in the industry. And the beauty of this is that it consumes only, now the latest numbers is 1.5 kilowatt power consumption compared to the conventional 200-ton consuming 7.5 kilowatts. So you can imagine the saving in power could be a couple of lakh rupees per year just using one such unit. Then we have wire fin heat exchangers also. These are patented in India as well as 3 European countries, and the applications can be air conditioning for evaporators, condenser, desuperator, air-to-air heat recovery, heat pumps, etc. And for dry coolers for various applications, indirect evaporative coolers, for many applications. We are using it in the solar collectors to heat up air up to 300 degrees centigrade. We are using it in ice bank tanks, which we are licensed for milk chilling and other applications for PCM storage and all. Then these are the diabetic contacting device which we had used in the McDonald unit. These are some of the applications of the diabetic cooling unit: efficient absorption, separation of gases, distillation, rectification, solvent recovery, absorption, refrigeration, air conditioning, refrigeration application, liquid desiccant dehumidification in this, hybrid air conditioning. Okay. In conventional air conditioning, we typically cool the air to dew point, cool it further to remove moisture, and then introduce into the room. Either preheat it or just release it into the room. It mixes and then comes back to this. Now in this liquid desiccant based hybrid air conditioning, we can go from 1 to 4 in a single step. In a solid desiccant based, you go here and then you can come here, or you can do deep dehumidification and then ambient heat rejection and evaporative cooling to come here. So in hybrid air conditioning, we use liquid desiccant and vapor compression system in a single unit. We have a patented technology where we can go from 1 to 4 in a single step. And in the COVID application, this will have a lot of applications because liquid desiccants also have the property of dehumidifying and desiccating the viruses, bacteria, viruses, and all those things. So anyway, so these are some of the systems there. And we have achieved COPs as high as 5 now are achievable with the conventional systems. We had achieved 4 COPs more than, I think, 15 years ago. And now with better compressors, we can achieve more than 5, while the conventional state-of-the-art 5-star AC is only reaching 3.6 or so today. Okay, then you talked about the dedicated outdoor air systems. So a few slides on dedicated outdoor air systems. Conventional air, outdoor air being cooled from this condition to this condition, okay, using indoor air, which is having lower temperature than the outdoor. But in this particular case, this is for a dry, hot and dry case, which we saw, okay, and we can continue the humidification here, and then we can do this. So toilet exhaust can be evaporatively cooled, direct evaporatively cooled, and then that can be used in an air-to-air heat exchanger to cool this down here. Now, this is another heat exchanger where we are taking the room air and humidifying it. And then if we just do sensible heating, you are going to get this. But in this case, as you can see, if we go like this, then we can use, even with much smaller flow rate of this air, we can cool a much larger flow rate of fresh air. And in places like Mumbai, where the humidity is high, the temperature is moderate, but the humidity is high, then you can partially condense also with this type of thing. And even with this, when you go like this can be brought down further if you're going up like this. Okay, so the advantages of DOAS with evaporative pre-cooling. DOAS helps improve the energy efficiency, especially while bringing fresh air to maintain good indoor air quality. Novel indirect evaporative pre-cooling techniques help reduce energy consumption compared to compressor-based DOAS without adding humidity to the incoming air. Possible to cool fresh air below the temperature of the room exhaust air, that is the room dry bulb temperature. The features of rotating contacting device in series with plastic air-to-air heat recovery exchangers. It is evaporatively pre-cooling of exhaust air, followed by using a compact and lightweight design. Plastic counterflow heat exchangers are used. So if you think that plastics are not good conductors of heat, that is true, but they can still be used for heat exchange with air in many applications. So, and we have proven that here. And in this case, the pressure drops can be very low with proper design. Plastic helps to reduce the initial cost and weight of the system. And because of that, the paybacks can be quite low. So this we have already seen before. This is one of the units which is deployed in Biosciences Department Bioschool. It's a 2,000 ton 2000 CFM air-to-air heat recovery indirect evaporative cooler. In this case, the stale air coming out, which is to be exhausted, is sprayed with water. So the 24-degree 55% indoor air, which is to be exhausted after it has been used, is sprayed with water. The temperature falls down to 19 degrees. So it is essentially getting scrubbed with water. And the temperature drops to 19 degrees. This 19-degree air is then used to cool the outdoor air in Mumbai, typically, let's say, in 30 degrees centigrade and 27 degrees bed bulb temperature, so around 80% RH. So this humid air comes in and goes out at 22.7 degrees centigrade with 100% RH. So the temperature has been dropped from 30 degrees to 22.7. And if you notice carefully, even the humidity has been reduced from 21.7 grams per kg to 17.5 grams per kg. So using, and this is all using just the air being exhausted. Okay. And in the process, you are also getting it scrubbed. Now, because this technology was not licensed, the heat recovery unit is deployed in CAC DEC building is not of this type, but of conventional type, where they're first having an air washer separate and then having a separate section for plate type heat exchanger. Okay, in this case, it was done in a single unit. But because IIT needs multiple quotations, up to 4 quotations are required to get a place order, this was not considered there. This we have already seen. I think these things are individual slides are there. Okay, I think I'll stop here. I'll let you ask questions and then come use my slides to show you some of the things that you need. Yes, please. Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much for the talk, sir. We have a few pre-talk questions which has been asked during registration. So okay. I'll ask you it one by one.
Yeah.
So Kedar has asked the UG courses like transport phenomena taught in second and third year. Can it serve a good basis to work in a heat pump lab at IITB?
UG courses like transport phenomena. Yeah. You see, the transport phenomena and all those things, like if you were to do simulation or do analysis of the experimental data, say something for this. Okay. So here what is happening is water is flowing down the answer is yes. Okay. If the water is flowing down along the film, and you want to find out what will be the mass transfer coefficient or thing like that, or water wet discs are being rotated through flow of air or thing like that to humidify it, dehumidify it, and so on and so forth. So what will be the mass transfer coefficient and so on and so forth. Okay.
So like the students in HPL lab IITB, do they work on the similar concept which is taught in UG curriculum?
Actually, we are more oriented towards development of the technology, testing of the units, and then licensing. Okay.
Okay.
Now the simulation which you're talking about is, unless somebody is interested in doing a PhD and has enough time to do all those things, because these simulations might take a long time. Okay. And the clients for whom we are doing, they normally will not be waiting for that time. So this is something which will not lead directly into the what do you say, meeting the timelines for the consultancy projects or the typical projects that we have. So we are doing this based on our past experience and based on the simple calculations. We don't get into we have not managed to do any CFD analysis or anything of most of these systems. Okay, because they're so complex and so running them through conventional CFD, at least so far, many of my students thought that they can do it. Some of them spent even 2.5 years of their RAP work on some of these things, and then finally in the last 6 months they gave up and they came down, and we developed some simple modeling based on MathCAD and things like that, and the programs were far more robust and workable, and we could use those for this. In fact, we are going to file some patent based on that analysis also in future. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, sir, Yash Mittal has asked, ki, what are the implication of 3D printing technology in this sector that you are working?
Okay.
Are there any?
Yes. In fact, I was thinking of buying a 3D printer in my house to develop the next generation of compressor. Like me and my son, we have developed some technologies for the next generation of compressors, and we are thinking of buying one 3D printer to continue the work while we are not in a position to go to the heat pump lab. So yes, to some extent, yes. But most of these, like if we can do that for our experimental purpose. You see, these may not be useful in the mass production or means for that application, if that is what is the tone of the question.
So the
But for
prototyping for
experimentation,
the
for
prototyping.
yes, we have used earlier. We have used help from Professor Karuna Karan's lab some 5-6 years ago, when we were trying to develop our solar air heaters with some contoured aluminum foils. So to contour some aluminum foils, we had got some this laser cut, and then we also got that was done outside, of course, at that time. And then we used to use, because making a CNC die for that was not feasible. So we decided that we will slice the die into slices of say 1 mm thick stainless steel strips, and then we got it laser cut, and then we assembled the strips to get us a 3D unit. But later on, then when we came to know that Professor Karuna Karan's lab, because I was associated with the drawing lab at that time also, so when I got exposed to that, they said that they can probably give us a plastic one. So we got those done in plastic, and we used those plastic 3D printed components to roll our aluminum sheets into the shape that we wanted to assemble in our solar air heaters. So yes, there are applications.
So, sir, there are a few interesting questions by Mohammad Saif Ansari. So he's
Okay.
asking, like, how to effectively make a timeline regarding product development. So, like, do you like to ask this question, or is it related to this?
No, I can try to answer, but you see, the thing is, can you repeat the question, please?
So, like, he is interested to know that how can we make an effective timeline for a product development, like planning and like executing.
Okay. You see, first thing what you need to do is, first thing you need to finalize the objective. What is the final aim, and what are the sub objectives which will enable you to achieve that aim? First, that has to be put down in clear form. Okay. So if he's around, maybe he can, and if he has the mic, or if he can speak out, he can give me an example, and I will try to answer with respect to that. If he has.
Okay.
in that
I guess
context.
he's in
Yeah.
the meet. I'll
Okay.
request host to
So,
unmute him.
yeah, if it is possible, I can give him specific answer.
Bital, can you unmute Saif Ansari?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute him, but due to
Okay,
some
I guess
technical error.
I guess
Okay.
he has some technical issues.
Okay, fine. So
Okay.
Yeah, he's
Hello,
unmuted.
hello, Professor.
yeah. Good evening.
Thank you, Professor. My name is F. Good evening, and thank you for this session.
Sure.
So thanks for letting my question here too for the organizers. And yeah, so let's take an example. Like I really like that in this COVID situation as well. Okay, so how shall we proceed? Like I want to develop some air conditioning unit for my HVAC or let's say thermal comfort in my home. Let's take an example.
Okay.
And we are taking off some kind of solar air heating or solar air cooling types of thing. So how can we build on that? How should we make
First thing, you need to fix up the indoor conditions. Okay. So where are you located?
I am
Mumbai,
from
Madhya MP. Okay. So is it a dry weather condition?
Dry, yes.
Dry. Huh. So you see, and then is your requirement for heating or is your requirement for cooling or is it for both?
Right now it is mostly on cooling.
Cooling. Okay. So if it is dry, then I think this slide which is up here, can you still see the slide?
Yes, sir, I can see the slide.
Yeah. So this slide itself can serve you. Okay. So if you if you take the ambient air and put it in from here, okay, you take the ambient air, it is coming in at 30. In your case, it will probably coming in at 40 degrees or 45 degrees or whatever it is. Okay.
Yes.
The RH will be low. Instead of 80 degrees, it might be 20 degrees, 20%, 25%. So that air will go in from here. Okay. And then it will come out at maybe 25 degrees. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the 25 degree air, part of it can go back into this. And then you spray the water. So when you spray the water in the 25 degree air, it will go to the wet bulb temperature, which might be somewhere around say 19 degrees or so. Okay. And then this moist air which comes out from here is simply exhaust. That's it. In fact, we have one such unit, a small unit made with just one of these units, because when we made this unit, we made a couple of extra units. So we had one unit, so we adopted that for this particular application. It's there in the lab. Okay. Now this is made in aluminum. Okay. You can make it in plastic. Now, since you have brought up this question, let me just put things in perspective. Now, aluminium, density of aluminium is around, specific gravity of aluminium is around 2.76. That of polypropylene is around 0.9. So it's almost 3 times lighter than aluminium. Okay. So for the same cross section, if you use plastic, the weight will be 3 times less than aluminium. And the cost of plastic is also going to be almost at least half of that of aluminium per kg. So straight away, you're getting a factor of 6 reduction in cost. Your weight will reduce by factor of 3. You get my point? But then you have to invest in dyes and so on and so forth. We had a dye for aluminium, so we made it in aluminium. So these are some of the possibilities. So yes, it can be as simple as that. So if you want to do this, this should be doable depending upon what type of profiles you're using and so on and so forth. It can be wrapped up even in a month. Hello.
Yes, I guess Mohammed has muted. So Bital, can you please unmute?
That's okay. Okay.
So, sir, as you mentioned it very clearly, one of those units can be utilized in my home, but it would be much more. Let's say I actually want to know ki, let's say we are taking some novel technologies into that, like we are starting from the.
So you have to decide what you're going to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is one thing, like the problem statement.
First, you have to start with very, very clear objectives.
Yes.
Okay. And then break it down into sub object. The overall aim should be clear. precisely defined. How much air you want to use, how much, what will be the temperature, what will be the range of temperatures during different weather conditions, what will be the range of RHS, and so on and so forth. So you should always check your design at the two extreme conditions. Okay.
True. Yes.
Just to get it need not satisfy 100% of your load at both the extreme conditions, but it should at least give you should be aware of what it is capable of doing under those conditions, and then you decide your design point, and then design it for that. And
Design points, as in, sir? Can you elaborate on this design point?
Yeah, you see, your extreme condition might be 45 degree or 48 degree in your place.
Yes.
Okay. So, are you aware of weather data from ISHRE, ASHRE?
I can get it, but I have not.
Okay. So,
have it in
see, if you see, different temperatures are encountered with different frequency. You know. So
Yeah.
if you talk about, in your case, if you talk about 48 degrees centigrade, it might happen only for maybe 30 hours in a whole year. Out of 8760 hours, it might be only 30 hours or so. Okay. But if you talk about 45 degrees or 42 degrees, it might be for maybe 1% of the time. That might be maybe 87 hours in a year. Okay. So then the question is, do you want to design for 48 degrees or do you want to design for 42 degrees?
Okay, so I get your point.
So
why unnecessary over design the pipe?
Yeah, means you see, on a 48 degree day, your unit will still do cooling. Okay, but it may not meet 100% of your load. So if you have designed it to give you to maintain 27 degrees, anyway, on a 42 degree outdoor, you don't want to design with 27 indoor. You'll probably be happy with 32 degrees also. Okay, without adding humidity. Note that we have not added humidity in this air.
Yes.
Okay. So without adding humidity, so if the temperature goes down to even 30 degrees, that is good enough. With a fan on, you will be very, very comfortable because it is dry air. In Bombay, with 30 degrees, we are not happy because humidity is high.
Humidity is high, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So proposed timeline, let's say, how, as in just time frame, how much time is required to
get something actually? Do you have the components available with you?
Okay. So the first question, do we have the components?
Are you going to go from, searching for components or developing components if they're not available? So the thing will be very different for different situations.
So let's say we are trying for it from the scratch, like we want to develop it from really novel thing.
No, when you say novel, first to find out what is novel, it could take you.
Exactly. Yeah. So literature survey is very, completely
literature survey, your patent search. And you see, literature from published journals and all will come much later. First is publication. First is patent. So if you want to get the latest information, you should first do thorough literature patent search.
Patent service, yeah.
Because you see, we don't publish until we file patents. After filing patents, then only we start publishing. Okay.
So the first step is to get acknowledged with the technologies, which is by
yes, obviously, because otherwise you might do something, you might develop something, okay,
and that is already
somebody has already patented, or for that matter, it might be even commercially available.
Yes.
Okay.
So what would be the next step then?
No, so first do the literature search, thorough literature search, patent search, then define your scope of work. Pick up the items which are readily available from the market, unless you think that you can leapfrog in terms of cost reduction or in terms of operating problem reductions and so on and so forth. Okay.
And then finally assembling it to get our product.
Assembling, then testing, verifying.
Testing. So testing and verifying, how much time it takes? Like, let's say for the average period, because we don't have any problem statement as per.
Well, it all depends on the thing. You see, some of the times, like we have recently transferred some technology on milk chillers. Okay, we had the concept ready. We had the entire scope was already predefined before I take my project. Okay. That they deliver in 9 months, assuming that we could do in 6 months. We promised 9 months, and then it stretched out to 15 months. Because see, there are many things. Now you develop something, you give it to the client, okay, and then halfway through he says, no, we can't do it like this. Although we had agreed for this earlier, now we find that this is not what is doable. We have to do it this way. So we were to give them chilled water storage. So then halfway through they said that they would prefer the size reduction, further size reduction, and this and that. And so we had to switch over from the chilled water based unit to we demonstrated chilled water within the scope of the thing. Okay, and then they said we would like to go to ice bank storage. So the whole project
concept was changed. Yeah.
a lot of things can happen.
Okay. So
This is just the dimension, but don't forget, you have to start with cost.
Yeah.
You have to start with cost and then end up with cost again.
Yeah. True. Okay, so I apologize to the organizer but I have one more question if they allow me to.
Yeah, sure.
So, sir, can you please just to give me a range, like how much least and the maximum amount of time it was required to develop and get it patented in your case, from the products from HPL Laboratories?
No, you see, don't say patented, because I would say till it is filed.
Okay, yes, okay, it's filed. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, true. That is some legislative, legal things.
Because once it is filed, the protection is on, provided it gets granted.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to wait till. No, it can be as low as a couple of years to as high as even, or maybe even 6 months. Okay, to as high as even 6 years.
Okay.
Why 6 years? Yeah, 6 years. Yeah, 5-6 years. And granting of patent, we have got one of our patent got granted after 12 years. Okay. In fact, our first patent on that exhaust heat recovery thing, which I filed after I came back to India before I joined IIT. I came back in 1993. And I was not actually planning to join IIT. I was planning to start something on my own. But then my father, who was also a professor in chemical engineering here, and I didn't get to study here, but I was a campus kid. So he managed to convince me that getting into the faculty here would be a good option, and I think I agree with him today. No, because I have all the liberty to do what I want to do, as long as I can manage my funds, and nobody creates any trouble for me, fortunately.
Thank you, Professor, for giving me time. Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you, organizers as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we have up for the time. So do you have any concluding remarks, sir, on this topic? What are the future implications?
Future applications, we are working on air water as a working media. So because refrigerants are still a problem, so we are looking at air and water as a working media. We are licensing now. As I said, we are licensing technology. The demonstration has been successful for more than 8 months, and the second phase has already started for 6 months for a 200-ton cooling tower. So we'll be licensing that technology also shortly, and we have eyes all the way up to the power plant cooling towers, which are running into thousands of megawatt, or lakhs of megawatt, you should say. Lakhs of tons of cooling. Okay, like 500, 800 megawatts of cooling, and so on and so forth. Because I have been involved in vetting the designs for the power plant cooling towers and industrial cooling towers also, as well as doing the PG test, performance guarantee test. So we found that some of our technologies are far better than anything else that we have seen so far in the industry. So there are many different options, and we'll be working on many. In fact, we still have to file more than, I think, 20 technologies we have to file patents on. We have not found time to even do that, because filing a patent, first we have to do thorough literature search. We know that we have not seen anything better than what we have developed so far in those areas, but we still don't have time to do the literature search and all those things, write the IDF. So most of my students who join me, if they contribute significantly to the literature survey, the patent search and this, and then they continue, their names get included in the patent, although they might not have contributed to the original idea, things like that. So if they're contributing to the patent search, and then continuing with the research. So many of my students have joined me in the second year, and then some of them have graduated. So every summer, winter, or something, they would continue. Somewhere halfway through, they might some of the patents might get filed, and then they might complete the thing. And like one of my recent research just finished is a PhD from MIT. Anyway, yeah.
Sure.
So
So thank you.
opportunities are huge. Opportunities are huge. Yeah. We have to think in a simple manner. See, we have not developed any fancy material. We don't work. Usually, most of our systems don't have close tolerances and things like that. And still, we manage to get results which are significantly better than best worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for the
I
talk.
hope it is
So,
useful for everybody.
yeah, exactly.
If you have recorded, I will appreciate if you can share that.
Yes, sir. We are planning to share this talk on YouTube, like sometime soon.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you so
opportunity
much,
once again, and all the best. Take care.
Yeah.
Do
Thank
mudras
you so
and be safe. Bye bye.